Hi, I'm Dave Cohen. I'm a PM manager at Microsoft.
Hi, I'm Nicole Woon, and I'm a program manager at Microsoft. And today we'll be talking about SharePoint sites and how you can use them.
So today we're going to talk to you about what are SharePoint sites, what are the two different types of sites, team site and communication site. We'll go through a team site demo, and we'll also go through a communication site demo, and then we'll show you some resources to help you get started. What are SharePoint sites? A SharePoint site is a site on your organization's intranet that helps people and teams work together and stay informed. Essentially, it's a website on your intranet, and only you and your colleagues have access to it, unless you invite someone else. Sites are easy to create and edit, and they're flexible enough to meet a variety of needs. We have two types of sites to choose from in SharePoint, a team site or a communication site, and we'll talk through the differences between them. A SharePoint team site connects you and your team to the content, information, apps you rely on every day. They're designed to optimize for team or project collaboration with Microsoft 365 group integration. A group in Microsoft 365 is a set of people that has access to a set of shared resources like a shared Outlook inbox, a shared calendar, or in this case, a shared SharePoint site, and includes the option to connect to Microsoft Teams. So that if you and your colleagues primarily work in Teams, you can still get all the benefits of your SharePoint team site there. A communication site, on the other hand, is a great place to share information with a broad audience in a visually compelling format. They're optimized for a small number of authors to communicate out to a wide audience, and they include some out-of-the-box homepage designs to help you get started and make your content look great. It should be noted that they're not connected to a Microsoft 365 group. However, you can use a group to manage permissions on the site. They just don't come with the shared resources like the shared inbox, the calendar, etc. So when would you use a team site versus a communication site? There are a couple different dimensions to consider, and we'll walk through a few of them. So to start with, different scenarios. So if you have a team of people that are collaborating together on a project or content, you would want to use a team site. On the other hand, if you have a small group of people that's authoring content to communicate out to a broader audience, then you'd want to use a communication site. The default home pages between the two sites differ. A team site includes web parts for productivity and team activity and updates, and a communication site's homepage includes web parts for really showcasing information and images. The navigation also differs between the two. Navigation on a team site is geared toward helping you get to the files and the lists that you work on in that site quickly. And the navigation on a communication site is really a blank slate to help you craft the navigation structure that you want your site to have and help your viewers browse to the content they're trying to get to. The life cycle between the two sites is actually pretty similar. Both can be relatively short-lived or long-lived. You can have a team site or a communication site last for years or last only a week or for one event. And then they do differ in how they connect to other apps. Like we said earlier, a team site is connected to a Microsoft 365 group, and it can also be connected to Microsoft Teams. A communication site, on the other hand, is really a standalone site and is not connected to any of those other applications. Let's walk through a couple example scenarios when you would use one site versus the other. If you have a project team working together, we talked about that would be a team site. But if you're building an official corporate news website, you would want to use a communication site. If you have a holiday party planning committee that's planning an annual get-together, you would want to create a team site for that. But if you're a team that's creating travel policies and guidelines for your colleagues, you probably want to make that a communication site because that's communicating out to a pretty broad audience. If you have an extranet site where you're inviting someone outside of your organization to come and work with you on files and lists and documents, that would be a team site scenario. A place to look up policies and procedures, not a place that lots of people should edit, you'd probably want to create a communication site. And then lastly, this is a great example of the same team and why they would choose a team site in one case and then a communication site for another scenario. If you work in human resources, for example, and you need a site where you and your colleagues are working together on the new policies for the upcoming year, or your work from home policies, you would create a team site so everyone had quick access to edit those documents and work together in real time. And then when you wanted to communicate those same policies out so everyone in your company could go and read them, you would create a communication site to host that content. So let's talk through some of the key components of a site. You have your pages and news posts, and that includes your homepage. You have libraries, which is where your documents are stored, as well as your pages and your images. And then you have your lists. That's the content in your site. Striped across all of that content is the site's navigation, the site's branding and theming, and also the site permissions. Now, before we get into demos, let's talk a little bit about the life cycle of a site. How do you get started? First, you create the site. And then you add your content. You create pages, you configure your web parts, you add files, you configure your branding, and you set up your navigation. You would then add permissions and invite either your collaborators to come and add more content with you, or you would add your audience if your site was ready to be shared out. And then finally, you would broadcast out your site, either by sending an email to your organization, sending a Teams message to someone, or just letting them know that the site's there and ready to look up. Now, for the team site demo, I'll hand it off to Nicole.
Dave just walked you through some examples of how you could use a team site. For this demo, I'm part of a group project with others, and I need a place for us to get work done. A team site can act as that flexible canvas for you to accomplish tasks and keep track of everything that you collaborate on with your team. I'll be taking you through how you can use a team site and get started in a matter of seconds. There are many different ways to create a new site, but the easiest is from the SharePoint start page. You can access it from two places: clicking SharePoint in the suite navigation if you're already on a SharePoint site, or by clicking the app launcher icon in the upper left corner and selecting SharePoint. The SharePoint start page lets you easily find and access sites across your organization. You can also discover news that's relevant to you based on the sites that you're following, frequently visited sites, and content that's recommended by Microsoft Graph. If self-service site creation has been enabled by your admin, you'll see the option to create a new site in the upper left corner. Now we can choose the type of site that we'd like to create. I'm creating a team site since I'd like to have a place to collaborate with my group and jointly create and edit content. I'll first type in my site name, Alpha 1 Team. In creating a team site this way, you see that it also creates an equivalent group email address. This is a connected Microsoft 365 group. Having this shared alias lets you easily set up a collection of resources that all of you can access, such as an Outlook inbox and calendar, planner, and OneNote. There's no need to manually assign permissions for each app as you're all members of the same Microsoft 365 group. The rest of the information looks good here, so I'll click Next. And I now see an option to add additional owners and members. There are multiple people that I want to add to the site, but for now, I'll just add one co-owner. With that, I'll click Finish. And in a matter of seconds, we're already on our home page for our team site. You can see that it's already pre-populated with web parts, which are the building blocks to add content to pages. The web parts that already come on a team site are news, activity, quick links, and documents. Some of them even have cues on how you can get started. Another way to see tips for what to do next on your site is by clicking on the Next Steps panel in the upper right corner. Here you can see suggested actions like uploading files, inviting team members, posting news, and adding Microsoft Teams. These all lead to a healthier and more active site. For our first action on the site, let's start with uploading a file. You can simply drag and drop onto the web part, or choose to click Upload in the command bar. I'll be uploading a Word document. To see a fuller view of the document library, I can do it in a couple different ways. The first is by clicking See All in the Documents web part. I can also click on the Documents link in my left-hand navigation, and I can also get to it from the Site Contents page. The Site Contents page has a list of all of the document libraries, pages, lists, and apps on your site. Speaking of lists, I'd like to create a list to track ownership and tasks for our upcoming business meeting series. I can easily do so by clicking New and selecting List. Now we have an option to create it from scratch, from an existing list, or from Excel. I'll choose to create my list based on an existing list so that I can retain the columns, views, and formatting that someone has set up previously. So first I'll choose from an existing list. I'll name my list. I'll also leave Show in Site Navigation checked, so I have it appear in the left-hand navigation. And then I'll go ahead and choose from the holiday party planning committee so that I can have that list as my template. You can see that once I've created this list, it already has a few columns populated: title, owner, and completed. Adding additional columns is easy to do by clicking Add Column. You'll see a choice of various different types of columns, and for this example, I'll use a choice column. And I'll go ahead and type in the name and the choices that I want. Once I'm done, I'll click Save. And we see it immediately show up in my view here. Now I can add entries in two ways. The first way is by clicking New, and by adding information in the panel that opens up. The other option is by going into Quick Edit to add new entries. Great, now that I'm done, I'll exit Quick Edit. And we can see all those items in my list here. Now that I have content populated on my site, I'd like to edit my homepage so that my team can easily access important resources. I'll click on Home to get back to my homepage. You can also get back to the homepage by clicking on the site icon in the upper left corner. Now to edit my homepage, I'll go ahead and click Edit in the upper right corner. And now we can see that I can edit, add, or delete web parts here. You'll notice that there are a few more buttons in this mode when you move your cursor over different parts of the page. First, I'll add the list that we just worked on as a web part to the top of the page. I can do so by hovering over the section that I want to add the web part to and clicking the plus button. This opens what we call the toolbox. I can go into an expanded view, and I can easily search for the web part that I'm looking for. Great. Next, I want to add a forms web part so that we can track signups for the upcoming business meeting series. Once I've added it to my page, we can now see that I have an option for new or add an existing. I'll go ahead and create a new sign-up form. When I click Create, this automatically opens up Forms in a new tab, and this way I can quickly add questions and build out my form. I'll go ahead and choose a few of the options that are automatically recommended from Microsoft Forms templates. When I go back to my SharePoint page, I can now see that it is automatically populated with the form web's address, and it is collecting responses by default. When I click OK, those questions immediately show up in the web part. The last edit that I want to make at the moment is to move some of my web parts around. First, I'll take the Documents Library web part and shift this up here. And then I'll move the News web part over to the smaller section. I think things look good to go, so I'll click Republish. And now these changes are available to anyone else who comes to my site. There were a few other people that I wanted to add, so I'll click where it says the number of members in the upper right corner. When I add a member here, they're added to the connected Microsoft 365 group that I mentioned earlier. Now that I've set up the site, I want to connect it to Microsoft Teams, which you'll sometimes hear as Teamify. You can do so by clicking on the prompt in the bottom left or from the Next Steps panel. From here, I'll click Continue. And I now see an option to pin particular resources from this site as Teams tabs, including documents and the homepage that I just edited. I'll leave those both checked as I want them to be included in Teams, and I'll click Add Teams. Now let's take a look in Teams to see what this experience is like. You can see that my Alpha 1 team is automatically populated in the app with a general default channel. You can take advantage of all of Microsoft Teams functionality and access all the content I just showed you in SharePoint. We can see it's already pre-populated with a few tabs. First, we have Posts, which is where conversations and meetings with my colleagues can take place. Next, we have the Files tab. For each channel that I create within this team, it will auto-create a folder that's stored in my site's default document library. To show you how that works, I'll upload a document and we'll circle back to it shortly. Next is the Wiki tab, which is a smart text editor that lets us quickly create notes and draft content. And finally, we have the Site tab, which we decided to pin when teamifying. We can see that it's the homepage that we just built in SharePoint. I can interact with the web parts here just as easily as I can from the SharePoint site. Also, remember how I uploaded a file to the Teams File tab? We can see in the Document Library web part that there's a new folder named General. If I click into it, I see the file showing there as well. You've just seen how to create a team site from scratch, populate it with information, and connect it back to Teams. Team sites make it easy for us to connect, collaborate, and create with our colleagues. And with that, I'll hand it over to Dave to walk us through a communication site.
In this next example, we'll walk through a person creating a site on their intranet to help onboard new employees to their company. A communication site is a great choice in this case because this scenario is typically a small number of authors creating content to be viewed by a large audience. And this site template is designed with those scenarios in mind. Remember, most of what I'm going to walk through can also be done on a team site. We'll start on a site we already created and added some web parts to, but it's not quite finished. The first thing I want to do is add a countdown timer to the top of the site to let everyone know we have new interns coming in a few weeks. I'll put the page in edit mode, and then in this left-hand bar, add a new full width section to the top of the page. The full width section is special in that there are a couple web parts made to leverage its extra width. The countdown timer is one of those web parts. After adding this part, I'll set the date the timer is counting down to. And edit the text of the web part. I'll also add a call to action button. And then I'm going to choose a background image. For this demo, I'm going to search for an image from the set of stock images that SharePoint provides to me. That looks great. Moving down the page, I have a set of links on the right that I've already filled out, but the style isn't quite what I want. Editing that part, I'll change the layout style to button. And then I'll choose to have the buttons be in the same theme color as the site by selecting fill color in the button appearance. Next, I have an image gallery on my page, and I've already added my images to it. but the layout isn't quite what I want. So I'll change the layout to be a carousel. And I also want to make this section of my website stand out a little bit more. So I'll click on this left bar again, and I'll change the section background to strong. And you can see this change reflected on the page immediately. Moving down my page a little more, I have a Twitter web part, so the people that view this page can see the official Twitter account for my company. And to the right of it, I want to add a Yammer web part and hook it up to our onboarding community. So the conversation source is already set to community, and all I have to do is search for the community that I want to connect it to. And our community shows right up. From this web part, our newest employees can engage immediately with the rest of the community or go to Yammer to explore others. Now, this homepage is looking pretty good, and we only made a few small tweaks. I want to make just a couple more changes to make my site look just the way I want. The changes that we made were all in this site's homepage, but the next changes I want to make are for the theme, the header, and the navigation for the whole site. To start, I'll go to the gear icon in the top bar and click Change Look. The first thing I'm going to do is change the theme color to teal. Going back into Change the Look, the next thing I want to change is the header of the site, and I want to make it a little smaller. I'll click Header and choose the compact layout. Now, I've already added some navigation links to the site header, but I need to add one more. So I'll click the Edit button next to those links, and you can see the navigation editing experience open up on the left. Just like adding a web part, I click on the plus icon to add a navigation link where I'd like to, and I'll paste in the address that I want to add. Now, I'll republish my page so that people who visit my site can see my changes. Our site is almost ready. Next, I want to add news posts to the site so that our audience can see the latest updates from the team. To do that, I'll click the Add button in the News web part and choose News Post. I'm then given the option to start from a blank page or to choose some templates included with SharePoint to help me get started. I can even see a preview of these templates before choosing one. I'll choose the basic text template and create page. Now, I've already written out my news post in Word, so I'll quickly copy and paste that text in. Next, I'll update the title image and choose a photo from our set of stock photos. This looks good. I can click and drag this circle to move the image around, and it also determines which part of the photo is kept in focus on smaller screens. Finally, I'll delete the parts of the template I don't need, and I'm all set. Back on my home page, my site is ready to be shared, so I'll click the gear at the top and click Site Permissions. First, I'll click Share Site, and then I'll add the group Everyone Except External Users. This allows everyone in my organization, except external users, to go and access my site. You can also see the permission I'm giving this group is a read permission, so they can read the content of my site, but they can't change, add, or delete content. I do have the option to send an email right from here to my audience, but because this site is for my entire organization, I'll elect not to do that at this time. Our site is now ready for our viewers. And now let's switch over to the SharePoint mobile app to show you what the experience will look like for people who are viewing the site on a phone. From the home experience of the app, I see my frequent sites, the people I work with, recent files, and I have the ability to search for anything I'm looking for. I see my onboarding site here, and I'll tap into it. As you can see, the site automatically adjusts to the size of the phone, and everything looks great. In the drawer in the upper left, I see the navigation links that I've set up. And scrolling down the page, I even see the news post that I just published. Going into that news post, I can read it, and I can even add a comment to it right here from my phone. Now, that wraps up our communication site demo, and I'll hand it back to Nicole.
We'd now like to share some additional resources. First, to see examples of beautiful modern SharePoint sites that you can easily build yourself, check out our lookbook at lookbook.microsoft.com and get inspired with the designs featured there. To learn more about the similarities and differences between team sites and communication sites, visit our docs.microsoft.com article. To view additional digital skilling videos, visit aka.ms/virtualhub. You'll have the ability to rewatch this video and search for other content that's relevant to you. And finally, got an idea for how to improve SharePoint? Share it with us on User Voice and gather support for your suggestion or vote for other people's ideas. Thanks again for joining us.